Hello, 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 hello. We're back with another podcast today. It's the iCough podcast. That's right. And right off the bat, I have to confess that I'm not super prepared for this episode today. And it's ironic, yet also kind of on the nose, my lack of preparation, because we're going to talk about social media and content creation and kind of the dynamic between creation versus consumption of social media, and kind of talking about what the best social media for artists specifically is, are, was, were, will be. Um, and I'm just underprepared, but I wanted to just do it because it was more important that I produce a podcast today than producing a perfect podcast and acting like I have this whole thing memorized. So, with that being said, I'm going to be doing a lot of reading from this notebook here, which I'm going to put just under the camera. So, if I'm looking down, I'm literally reading from my notes that I took. So I am prepared. I wrote notes. I know what I want to say, but I just don't have it all memorized, and I would rather just read it from a paper to stay on track. And so I'm going to do that, and I hope you don't judge me. I'm sure you won't. Disclaimer, I am not probably the most trustworthy of an authority on talking things social media, simply because across all my platforms, I probably have around 4,000 followers. That's basically between Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And I bet that of those 4,000 followers, there's a lot of overlap. So it's probably closer to like, I don't know, 2,000, 2,500 followers unique across my platforms. So take all this advice as you will. Hopefully the information speaks for itself. I'm kind of just giving you a summary of content that I have consumed over the years about this topic of social media and production, um, creation versus consumption spectrum. So, yeah, maybe my career is not proof and evidence of this data, but I'm just going to give you some information that I've heard that has resonated with me, and hopefully it resonates with you, and hopefully you at least learn something new. So let's just dive into it. I'm going to start with a list of pros and cons for social media as a whole, just kind of in general, particularly when it pertains to being an artist. So let's start with the pros. I think that we are in kind of a renaissance of communication in society as a whole. Social media has allowed us to stay connected and to basically have an ongoing conversation across the globe, really. I mean, even in different cultures and different languages, we can communicate with each other on social media. Even Instagram and Facebook have integrated a translation function, like in the description of a post on Instagram. If it's in a different language than you speak, there's usually like a little link button that says translate, and it translates it into your native language, which I think is super cool. We've never seen anything like this before. Um, I don't think it's ever been easier to be an artist because of social media, because of the immediate access we have to our fans and our following, and to other artists as like resources. This is my microphone, by the way, if you didn't know that. So I've just got it magnetized on the back. That's why I'm holding this. For you watching on YouTube, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry. I'm holding up a paintbrush, and my microphone is magnetized to the back of the paintbrush, so it looks like I'm just talking into a paintbrush. Anyway, the pros. It's never been easier. Um, there's a high demand for content. I know this because of how much I consume content, especially YouTube. I'm just on YouTube all the time and wanting more videos from the people I'm subscribed to. I'm subscribed to like 30 or 40 different people on YouTube, and I'm always looking every day for new content out there. So there's always going to be a high demand for content. I think it's just growing and growing. People are getting on social media more than ever. They're growing, they're duplicating every year. Um, so there's a demand for content, which is good for content creators and artists, which pretty much all artists that are on social media could be considered content creators because they're creating the content that is consumed on those platforms. Um, Social media is great for artists because it allows you to be independent instead of reliant upon representation like in the past, maybe even 20 years ago. As an artist, like a visual artist, for example, like myself, a painter, you kind of relied upon galleries to distribute your work and to show your work. Now you have a little bit more autonomy with social media, and you can kind of build your own audience and don't need representation. So you can be more independent and entrepreneurial in that regard. Um, Obviously, you can build a community and kind of maintain a following, which includes hopefully committed relationships. Kind of depends on what platform you're on. I think some are better than others. But this is good. You're building patronage. It kind of goes in hand with the independent representation, all that jazz. You got to work for it, but once you gain a following and kind of can cultivate a community, usually it's there for good, and it's just going to strengthen over time, ideally. Um, One thing that's kind of like a sleeper pro for social media is that it acts as like a database or a catalog for your work. So, especially if you're on YouTube. Um, for me, I started doing YouTube videos right after I graduated college with my art degree. So it's basically like since I began my professional career as an artist, even before I went full time, even when I was doing work and just painting on the side, um, I've been documenting my painting process, excuse me, and can kind of see my progression over the years. It's only been, it's been less than a decade, I guess, since I started my YouTube channel. Um, but almost a decade, which is a lot. I feel like I've grown a lot since starting that, and we're just beginning. So hopefully by the time I'm 60, I'll have even more growth to see. So that catalog is really nice. Instagram is even like that. It serves as a portfolio. Like you have your website, hopefully as well, a separate landing page outside of social media. But Instagram is pretty good about that. Facebook is pretty good about that, even personally, like on a personal level. Like I have pictures of myself from early high school when I got my Facebook profile in the beginning. So that's kind of cool to see that and have a catalog of your life, of your art, all that. Social media is great for that. That's a pro. Um, Social media also is really good for showcasing your personality. One of the reasons I'm so passionate about creating video content is because I feel like my personality can help inform my art. So if you're a fan of my art product, my paintings, my murals, learning and understanding my personality and who I am, I think hopefully enhances my art, and vice versa. I think my art enhances my personality as well. So I think having social media and being able to post like stories and especially video and vlog format content is super helpful for cultivating an audience, like we talked about. Um, you know, we're not so reliant on putting work up in a gallery and then writing an artist statement, which I know a lot of artists like myself dislike having to write artist statements because we're like, shouldn't my art speak for itself? Why do I need to be a poet and a writer at the same time? Now we can be more informal and just write post descriptions on Instagram and YouTube and Facebook. And we can narrate voiceovers when we do like time lapse videos. And post in our stories with captions of in progress work and like talk about it. And we can be more intimate with our process with our fans, which is great. Good things about social media being an artist. So that's my pros. Let's get to the cons. And there's a lot. Obviously, social media can be a time suck. You can waste a lot of time, no matter who you are, if you're an artist or not. You can waste a lot of time and overconsume. It's where you're on the other side of the spectrum. You're creating not enough and you're consuming way too much. That's a problem for everybody, especially artists, for a number of reasons that I'm about to explain. Probably the biggest being the idea of comparison. Comparison is the thief of joy. That's the cliche quote. I don't know who said that. Maybe Ben Franklin. I don't know who said that. But it's true. The more you compare yourself to others, the less you become aware of what you have to offer and what's good, and you focus more on what you don't have. And that is bad. It's good to get on social media for inspiration, to look at other artists' work, to study other artists out there, and to maybe even set goals. Be like, I want to do what that person's doing in the future. But it's really easy to get caught up in the negative side of that. So you got to watch yourself. Overthinking and people pleasing. This is an issue that I don't think people really necessarily realize when they're on social media. You're thinking about how your art is going to be received because we have that immediate kind of feedback. You post your work on a social media and you get instant feedback from likes or lack thereof, or comments or lack thereof, and you almost let that affect your work, and it can have a negative impact on your work because you're thinking about that. You're like, oh, this post didn't do as well. This post did. Maybe I need to make my art more like that. Even if it's not even a conscious thing, you might be subconsciously catering your work to some arbitrary, algorithmic kind of feedback loop, which is definitely harmful, and can push your art into a direction that you wouldn't naturally take it, and it's not great. I mean, there's like a balance to that, right? Like you do want to use feedback and especially criticism to get better, but it could be a trap as well, and an endless cycle of overthinking, and even paralysis. That's not good. So another thing, like I said, you're kind of at the whim of the algorithm. Now, there's ways to analyze the algorithm and stay up to date on trends, and even understanding new kind of programs that these apps are putting out, and changes to the algorithms that the creators of these apps will actually announce, and you can like find that information and you can be diligent about staying up to date on that. But it's kind of a headache. It's hard to keep up with the algorithm, and unfortunately, although I said social media can allow you to be entrepreneurial and independent, um, by putting all of your database and connection to your community and fan base trusting in the apps to do so, that's not really in your control. Whether or not the algorithm will show your work to the people that want to see it, to your audience. You're kind of at the whim of that algorithm, and that's scary. That's a lack of autonomy. So that can be really daunting. It's out of your control. That being said, there are things that you can do to stay educated on that. And, I've heard some creators, especially on YouTube, talking about the algorithm, and you shouldn't have a horrible attitude about it and be like, oh, it's the algorithm's fault that I'm not succeeding. It's like, well, take responsibility for what you can. And at the end of the day, the algorithm could be subbed out for the word audience. And it's just that you maybe haven't found your audience yet, whether that's the algorithm's fault or whether you're just not producing value for the people that want your content, or you're not producing a quality enough content that is attracting an audience organically. So just be aware of that, and your attitude on that matter. Um, so even though I said before there's a lot of demand for content and that was a pro, the downside of that is it could be oversaturated. I'm talking more like contemporary times now versus even like 100 years ago, because social media is so easy to create on and to post work on. A lot of people are doing it. I mean, there's how many millions of artist accounts on Instagram alone. Um, so it could get oversaturated. There's just like a lot of content out there that you have to kind of rise above and be somewhat competitive as far as like producing quality content. You got to set yourself apart somehow from the millions of accounts. So it can be oversaturated. I still think that the demand is there. I still think that it's worth doing and creating and posting, and I think it's a bad excuse to be like, oh, it's oversaturated. I think it's still worth doing. You just gotta lean into what's unique about you and makes you different and sets you apart. So don't let that ruin your attitude either. Um, Another thing that is a negative is that even creating on social media, we talked about consuming on social media being a negative thing, but even creating on social media can be a time suck. It can take a lot of time to organize a post, to write a description, to take good high quality photos of your work and to edit those, and then to make sure you have them in your phone and can upload that. So that can take time. It's not a lot, but like it's something. And then you could just get sucked in. Like to get to post something, you usually have to be in the app unless you're using like a third party posting platform, which I do now. I use Metricool. I'll put a link in the description to that app. It's pretty good. There might be better, but it's free and it can post to multiple platforms at once. And I like it because you don't have to get on the app in order to post. So you don't get caught up in doom scrolling just from posting. Because you got to post on social media as an artist. But sometimes you'll post and then you'll start scrolling through your feed. And so using an app like Metricool can prevent that. It helps avoid getting on the app in the first place. But if you don't use that, it's just really easy to overconsume social media. I don't think I can say that enough. And there's value in detoxing from social media consumption just to reset your like dopamine cycles. And if you're trying to do that while being a content creator, it's like twice as hard because you have this need and this desire and almost obligation to post. So it's like you don't have the luxury of just being like, I'm going to get off social media for my mental health. It's like you should still do that over hyper fixating on meeting a quota of how many posts you need to make in a week or a month or whatever. Prioritize your health and your mental health, please, first. But it's just not as easy as somebody that's just on social media to look at stuff. They can just get off and they don't have to worry about keeping up with their fan base. Being a content creator, social media, it's great. We talked about the pros. Another con is that we have this now extra element on top of our process that could be distracting from getting into flow state. So like, for example, when I'm painting a mural and I have to stop painting, I might be in the flow, but I hear my GoPro battery dying in the background. Now I have to stop painting, break myself out of flow to go change that battery. And that's no bueno. It's hard. It's just like another element. So it's still worth it. I think you should just, account for that time and add time onto your schedule in your process. But it is, it's kind of a pain in the ass to have to document your work. It takes you out of flow. Not so great. That's a negative. Also, just like understanding how to work these applications. It requires a technical fluency of sorts. There's definitely a learning curve of like how does Instagram even function? How does YouTube even function? I think YouTube might be the hardest one as far as understanding thumbnails, titles, descriptions, all the different boxes to check in your upload panel in the creator studio on YouTube. It's just like, it's frustrating because the reason that we are artists, I think a lot of times, at least this is for me, and I know I've talked to a lot of artists that this is the same sentiment, that the reason we're artists is because we like to work with our hands. We like the tactile nature of the medium that we're working with. We like just kind of zoning out, zoning in to our process and just kind of losing ourselves in the material. Um, so to expect ourselves to be technologically savvy, understanding how to use a smartphone or getting deeper in some of these apps like YouTube, it's just kind of counterintuitive, and it's a lot of staring at a screen, and that's just not ideal. It's not fun. So that's a negative. And that concludes my list of pros and cons. So let's kind of elaborate on this list, and I'm just going to kind of give you some tips. I've already kind of feathered in some tips while I was explaining those lists, but we'll just kind of get into them a little bit more. I talked about the balance between creation versus consumption, and I think that's kind of the thesis of this podcast. And just, whether it's your mindset or whether it's the actual time that you're spending on these apps, trying to push more towards that creative side of the spectrum versus consumption for all the reasons that I've already listed. My tip for you is to consume enough to get inspired and understand the platform and how it functions, and to stay connected with your following, such as like responding to questions in the comments or whatever, and making sure that you're posting regularly enough to keep your followers engaged. So consume enough to where you can accomplish those things, and then get off and focus on creating more art. So limit time on apps. I know that's kind of straightforward. It's not anything revolutionary. There are functions, at least on an iPhone, I know, that you can set parameters or time limits per day on how much time you're allowed to spend on social media. And I think it's pretty easy to like extend it, which is like bittersweet, because you can just override it. But you can, like, if you're working on a post and it's taking a long time to write your description or whatever, you can like extend it for 5 minutes and make sure you get that done. Also like scheduling posting, that Metricool app I described, you can schedule posts. So like you can just pick an hour out of your day to schedule the posts for even the next few days, without getting on the app, and you can just have it ready to post at an ideal time. So there's ways to work around that and limit your usage so that you don't get trapped into consuming too much. Also, another tip, I think one of the most important things that I said about the negatives of social media is the comparison is the thief of joy quote. And I think that is remedied by just consciousness, becoming more aware of when you are comparing yourself to others. And just remember that things may not always be as they seem. You never know what other artists had to endure in order to achieve what they have, whether it's the position they're in their career or whether it's the opportunities that they're getting. You just don't know what they did before that. You're comparing yourself to them when you don't know the work that they put in, because that doesn't always get shown. You only see like the end product. So just be more conscious of that. Even like skill level, you might be like, I wish I was that good. It's like, well, you would be if you put in as much time as them. Don't discredit the amount of effort they've put in and be jealous and petty and compare. It's not fair for either person. A quote from Jordan Peterson: Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who others are today. I think that's a great quote, and that applies to anything, not just art. So another tip is to focus on your production. Sounds pretty straightforward, but let me elaborate. Set goals for your upload rate. This is more for YouTubers, and it's something that I need to be better about. I'm trying to do it with these podcasts, trying to do one a week, trying to do another video a week. So I'm doing at least 1 or 2 videos per week. Focus on your production, as in, like, what do you want your output to be? And then think about what input you need to perform in order to make that happen, and just try and increase your quality over time through that. Obviously, you've probably heard about consistency. I don't want to be cliche and redundant, but think about what consistency means to you. Like I said, focus on maybe a goal, but also focus on what your process is. Something I've been working on this past year is finding a process that I enjoy. Trying to make sure that my processes that I'm doing, whether it's making videos and filming footage for videos, or designing murals, or just painting for fun, thinking about what is fun for me, how to make video projects more creative, getting interesting shots so that editing can be more fun. Don't force it. Do something that you would enjoy. Obviously, it has to have meaning. You can't just like scribble stuff down because it's fun, but it's like not good work. You want to find something that's fun without forcing it, but there's like a balance there. And you want to make sure that you establish a sustainable routine. So that's why I said, like, if you start with a goal of like, I want to just upload more, I want to post more, and you say once a week, that might seem arbitrary, but if it's sustainable, if it's something that you can do consistently over time, that's the best. You want to find a schedule instead of like being like, I'm going to make a really profound, perfect video content piece every week. Just be like, I just want to do something every week, and then figure out how to make that sustainable. Like, how much time is it going to take? Maybe you won't have 20 hours a week to put into a YouTube video, especially if you have a full-time job. Think about how much time you have to spend on that passion of yours, whatever it is, and figure out how good you can make something in that time limit and work from there. And that can help you establish a sustainable routine. What is the bare minimum of quality and quantity? Start there and aim up. That's what I say. So, like, a good example of this that I do is miniature paintings. I'll do like the 3x3 or 4x4 inch mini paintings. And that allows me to finish a full painting, albeit a small one, in just a couple hours. And that's pretty sustainable. Then I just get better over time, or faster over time. You know what I mean? So figure out what the bare minimum is. Like, say I only have 2 hours to paint. What can I paint in 2 hours? Something really small. And then aim up. Try and get better every time. And you probably just inevitably will as time goes on. Stop trying to be perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good or complete. I've talked about this in a couple different podcast episodes. Feck Perfectionism. Go check that out. It's better to complete and to sustain a routine than it is to expect perfection. That's kind of the idea behind this. We're thinking about the process. We're thinking about our habits. We're thinking about routine. That's what's most important. It's not important to make the best art we've ever done. Obviously, you want to try your best in the moment, but what's more important is the sustainability, the consistency over time, because that's how you're really going to get good. So yeah, stay focused on the long game. We're all on our own journey. Don't compare yourself to others. Think about it long term. Don't try to rush things. You can't control when destiny's going to come. If you stay consistent, though, it inevitably will. If you want to be a full-time artist, maybe you have a full-time job and you just want to transition from being an employee to starting your own art business, photography, painting, crocheting, whatever it is, you're not always in control of when you're going to get your break and when you're going to, build your following and reach that threshold that allows you to sustain that as a career. But if you stay consistent and you do it over time, it probably will. Even if it's 10 years from now, even if it's 20 years from now, do whatever you can in your current lifestyle, whatever's the most sustainable, whether it's an hour a week, 5 hours a week, whatever. Figure out your bare minimum and at least do that every single week. Okay? Fuck going viral. Hot take. Fuck going viral. Unless you are rock solid in your process, unless you are just like fucking undiscovered gem, a pro, and you might feel that way sometimes. And I'm not saying you're not, but I'm just saying it's better to be more prepared and your traction in your career lagging behind your preparedness or behind your capabilities. That's better than to get your opportunity prematurely. Does that make sense? So, that being said, there's merit to the fake it till you make it kind of mantra. Because, in a sense, nobody really knows what they're doing. And I think everybody's kind of faking it to some extent. And, like, there is definitely intrinsic value in having faith. In fact, it's probably crucial and the most impactful thing you can do is have faith. But just try not to get carried away in trying to be viral because you want your success to be real. You don't want it to come and go quickly. You want it to come and be here perpetually, to be for good. So we're going for the long game. We don't have to worry about getting there fast. It's just about getting there. And I think it's more important to focus on that than to try and make things happen and get rich quick. Because usually that comes with caveats that you're not willing to endure. And overall, I just think it's better to under-promise and over-deliver than the other way around. Does that make sense? Okay. Obviously, imposter syndrome comes for us all, regardless. I have a podcast episode about that. So that's another obstacle in the way for that long game. But be patient. That's another tip. Just be patient. This is the long game. We're doing this for good. Do you really want to be Basquiat and die early? Do you want to live that fast life? Maybe you do. I think you do, but you really don't. I think we all want meaning and sustaining careers. I think the tortured artist paradigm is overrated. I think we like to say that as artists whenever we're suffering to justify our suffering and to kind of glorify the process and the resistance within us and our demons and whatever. But I think what's really important is the journey and the experience and not the outcome. I think legacy is important. It's a good motivator to think about what you're going to leave behind, but that shouldn't take precedence over the journey and the experience and the joy that you can find in life, in the present moment. So, tortured artist, overrated. I think people use it as an excuse to justify certain attitudes or activity or vices. So just be careful of that. I'm not trying to shame anybody. Just be weary of those things. Another tip, which is what I think YouTube is particularly good for because of the personality, is to establish meaningful connections. There's a book that I'm gonna start reading. I forgot the actual title. It's like, I think it's called like 1,000 True Fans. I forgot the artist. I should know this. Maybe I'll link it in the description. We'll see. You will know. It's better to have 100 true fans than 100,000 shallow fans. And I think that's true because for a lot of reasons, but the idea is that you want meaningful connections, and this kind of ties into the virality thing. Like, you don't want people that are just there for a moment and then gone in the next. You want people that are going to really connect with you and who you are as a person, and connect with your art on a deeper level, because those are the people that are going to appreciate you the most, and they're there for a reason. So you want to focus on being authentic and attracting the true fans that are going to be loyal and committed to you and your production and your content. That's what you really want. It's easy to be like, I want this high number of followings or subs, but really you just want more committed and intimate followers. I think it's beneficial to be aware of trends and where you might fit in the context of society. But ultimately, artists are allowed to be unique. It's actually something that is expected of us as artists. So, um, throughout history, I think artists have been countercultural, even. And that's a massive advantage for our field, to be just to have indefinite permission to just be weird and goofy and not normal. So be authentically you and don't be afraid, because that's how you're going to get your true audience. Don't be weird just for the sake of being weird. Like, be authentic, be yourself. And there's no reason to fear people not accepting you, because that's kind of the point of being an artist, is to be unique, to show people new perspectives, and to be novel and creative. Creative. We are generating out of nothing. We are taking something that exists and putting our own spin on it. We're creating. That's the idea. So you can pretend or fake that you know what you're doing, but you can't hide who you are, at least not indefinitely, and certainly not without consequence. You don't want to build a following based on somebody else, some persona that you're enacting. Just be you. I'm talking to myself, by the way. I sound preachy, like I'm talking to you, and I am, but I'm mostly talking to myself. And that goes for all these podcasts. So if you ever think, like, who is this guy? What does he think he knows? Why is he bossing me around? The truth is, I'm just talking to myself. And that could be more true, because here I am looking at my phone, camera, lens in my room by myself. Okay. Stay connected to your why. This might be the most valuable tip in this whole podcast, because it's easy to get swept away. Social media is a slippery slope. It's a dangerous place to be. You can get consumed by it. You can be coerced by the messaging on these platforms, especially now that we know that Meta has been duped by the powers that be and has been actively censoring information that doesn't align with the social narrative. If you didn't know about that, look it up. Mark Zuckerberg confesses to hiding information and censoring information on Facebook and Instagram, and was pressured by the Biden administration. So I'm not going to tell you anything about politics, who you should vote for. But if you think that your side is benevolent and you are on the Democratic side, listen, they both have their flaws, both sides of the aisle. But the left is up to some dastardly shit. If you're an artist, you should care about censorship. Today's Democratic Party, this isn't how it used to be. In the 60s, they were the anti-censorship. They were the Liberty Party. Now it's not that way. Now they're trying to censor and control information. And why should I trust them Why should I trust the government to be arbiters of the truth when they've repeatedly lied to us about a lot of stuff? And if you want to justify that because they know better, I'll have to just disagree with you. I think freedom of speech is massively important, especially for artists. Again, I'm not telling you who to vote for. Maybe you have other issues that you think are more important, and fair enough. I respect that, I guess. Um, but I think it's very important for artists to maintain freedom of speech. It's actually crucial, and it's non-negotiable. It's the First Amendment. So that's my hot take. I'm not trying to get political. I don't even know why I was saying that. Just because social media can be a dastardly place. It gets really political really fast. Um, it's like a whirlwind of people pointing fingers, and it sucks because both parties are super guilty of that. So it's important that you stay connected to your why. Think about why you got into this in the first place. Why are you even on social media in the first place? Is it so that you can waste your time and doom scroll? Or is it so that you can promote your art and to be an entrepreneur and to sustain a living doing what you love? Do you really care about your following, your count, the number behind it? Or is that just a subsidiary of your reach and ability to create revenue? Why is it important? Okay, think about it. What's your why? Do you really want that number by your follower tally, or are you trying to expand your business and expand your reach and your impact? It's easy to get bogged down by the analytics, so make sure that you're connected to your why. Maintain a mantra for your purpose in creating so you don't get lost in the matrix. Okay? Hopefully this was helpful for you. Let me know what you think in the comments. And I'm sorry if it was boring and redundant. I know I kind of touched on some stuff that I touched on other podcast episodes, but I kind of just wanted to tie it together into a social media specific conversation with myself. And I've just been thinking about it a lot recently. I really am trying to make a push on YouTube, trying to get my personality there and my voice and to speak my experience into existence, and just for maybe the few people that could benefit from it. So if I provided you value, I hope that's the case. Thanks for watching, and I will have more for you to come in the future. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hit the stop. Hit the stop. Hit the stop. What the fuck? Hit the stop. Hit the stop. Hit the stop.